In the heart of Manhattan's most luxurious hotel, a single act of quiet courage will uncover a secret buried for generations. A secret powerful enough to topple the man who has ruled these halls with an iron smile. When a proud guest is silenced and a hidden room reveals the truth, every whisper in the grand lobby becomes a step toward a battle between justice and corruption. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. The Imperial Crest Hotel in downtown Manhattan was a place where everything gleamed. Its marble floors shone under golden chandeliers, and the air carried the faint scent of roses mixed with polished wood. Guests came here expecting perfection, a world where money bought not only comfort, but respect. On a quiet afternoon, the grand hall was alive with hushed voices and the faint clink of teacups. The tall glass doors opened, and Liang Wu stepped inside. His suit was tailored to perfection, his shoes carrying the soft shine of fine leather. His gaze moved across the vast lobby, taking in the towering columns and the painted ceiling that told stories from another age. He approached the front desk, a calm determination in his step. When Liang spoke in Mandarin, his voice was polite but steady. "Hello, I have a reservation under Wu." The receptionist, a young man in a pressed uniform, glanced at him, confusion flickering across his face. Before Liang could say more, Simon Crake, the general manager, appeared. Simon's silver hair and expensive watch gave him an air of authority, but his smile was thin and cold. "Sir," Simon said slowly, in exaggerated English, "if you cannot speak the language, it might be difficult to assist you." The words were smooth, but the tone carried a faint sting, a message only half hidden. Liang tried again, switching between broken English and Mandarin. "Reservation, today, please." But Simon's expression did not soften. He turned to the receptionist and said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Perhaps this gentleman should have brought someone to help him." A ripple of whispers spread through the lobby. A couple seated on a velvet sofa leaned closer to each other, their voices barely above a breath. "Looks like he's lost," one said. Another guest, sipping coffee, smirked. "Money can't buy manners, I suppose." Each comment landed like an invisible weight on Liang's shoulders. He stood straighter, willing himself to show no sign of hurt. But inside, the sting of being treated as an outsider in such a public way was sharp. Near the far wall, Janessa Miles dusted a polished side table. She had been working at the Imperial Crest for almost 3 years. Most days, she kept her head down, moving quietly through the grand spaces. But today, something made her pause. She understood the words Liang had spoken. She understood them perfectly, because she had once lived in Shanghai during her teenage years. Her eyes followed him as he reached for his suitcase, a vintage leather case with brass clasps. As he lifted it, something small slipped to the floor. Janessa's breath caught when she saw it, a pendant, round and smooth, with an intricate carving of a crane in flight. Its emerald inlay caught the light in a way that seemed almost alive. She had seen a similar symbol before, in an old history book kept in her grandfather's study. The book told stories of families who had built parts of Manhattan decades ago, families whose legacies were forgotten or erased. She remembered one story in particular, about a woman who lost her land under unfair circumstances, her family's symbol being the emerald crane. Janessa bent down, fingers hovering over the pendant, but she hesitated. In her mind, she could already hear Simon's voice, if he caught her speaking to a guest without permission. She had seen how he treated staff who stepped beyond their duties, Polite words in public, sharp consequences in private. At the front desk, Liang's attempts to be understood were failing. Simon was already motioning for the next guest in line, dismissing him with a polite but firm wave. The lobby's atmosphere shifted, curiosity and quiet judgment hanging in the air. Janessa's hand closed around the pendant. The smooth surface felt warm in her palm, as if carrying a history of its own. Her heartbeat quickened. She knew she had a choice: return the pendant silently, or step forward and bridge the distance between this man and the world that was shutting him out. For a moment, she stayed still, her gaze locked on Liang's tired but proud face. The murmurs around the lobby seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of her own pulse. She thought of the crane, a symbol of endurance and truth. She thought of the injustice she had read about in her grandfather's book. Then she took a step forward. Each movement felt heavier than it should, the polished marble under her shoes reflecting her small frame as she crossed the wide space. Simon's eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of her approaching the guest, but she didn't slow down. When she reached Liang, she held out the pendant. "Sir," she said softly, in perfect Mandarin, "I believe this is yours." The words hung in the air, drawing a sharp stillness across the lobby. Heads turned. The whispers stopped. Liang's eyes widened, a flicker of surprise breaking through his composed expression. In that quiet moment, the grand hall of the Imperial Crest seemed to change. The cold marble felt less distant. The golden light felt warmer. And Janessa knew there was no turning back from the choice she had just made. This was the beginning of something neither of them yet understood, but it carried the weight of history and the promise of truth waiting to be found. Liang Wu's fingers closed around the pendant as if it were a lifeline, the cool surface pressed into his palm, its weight grounding him in the middle of the tense lobby. For a moment, he simply stared at Janessa Miles, hearing her words in his native Mandarin as clearly as if he were back in his grandmother's courtyard in Guangzhou. "You speak Mandarin?" Liang's voice trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the shock of being understood in a place where every other voice had turned cold. Janessa gave a small nod, her eyes steady. "I do. I lived in Shanghai for 3 years when I was younger. I can help you, if you'd like." Before Liang could respond, Simon Crake's polished shoes clicked across the marble. His smile was thin and sharp. "Miss Miles," he said in a tone that could cut glass, "housekeeping staff are not responsible for guest communication. Please return to your duties." Liang's gaze shifted from Janessa to Simon, and then back again. In deliberate English, he spoke. "I would like her to help me. She understands me." The request was simple, but it carried weight. Simon's jaw tightened. "Sir, our hotel offers professional interpreter services if needed. I can arrange that." "No," Liang interrupted, his tone calm but unyielding. "She will do. I trust her." There was no room left for argument, at least not in public. Simon's expression cooled even further, but he stepped back. "As you wish," he said, his voice smooth but stripped of warmth. Janessa led Liang toward a quieter corner of the lobby, away from curious eyes. The soft hum of the fountain filled the space between them. "Thank you," Liang said in Mandarin. "This place, it is not what I expected. I came here for more than a stay. I came for something my family lost." Janessa tilted her head, her curiosity deepening. "What do you mean?" Liang's voice dropped, as if the chandeliers themselves might be listening. "Many years ago, my grandmother owned the land where this hotel now stands. She built her life here until it was taken from her through lies and betrayal. She kept one thing from those days, This pendant. She told me it was the key to finding the truth. I believe there is something hidden here, proof of what happened. Janessa's eyes fell to the pendant in his hand. The carved crane seemed to shimmer under the golden light. And you think it's still here, after all this time? Yes, Liang said firmly. My grandmother spoke of a hidden place inside the building, a room that would only open to this symbol. Janessa hesitated, glancing toward the reception desk where Simon stood watching them from a distance. If you're right, finding it won't be easy. He won't want you to. Liang's lips curved into the faintest smile. Then we will not ask his permission. Later that afternoon, Janessa guided Liang through the quieter halls of the Imperial Crest. She had learned every corner of the building over the years, from the grand ballrooms to the unused service corridors. In a dim hallway near the oldest part of the hotel, her gaze caught something unusual, an engraved crest on the wall molding, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Liang, she whispered, pointing to it. Is that your family symbol? He stepped closer, tracing the outline of the crane with his fingertips. Yes, this is it. With careful hands, he pressed the pendant against the carving. A faint click echoed in the stillness. The panel shifted, revealing a narrow door. Janessa's breath caught. It's real. The hidden door creaked open, and a cool draft swept over them. Inside was a small chamber, its walls lined with shelves. Dust covered the air, and the scent of aged paper filled their lungs. Liang stepped inside first, his eyes sweeping over the contents. Stacks of leather-bound ledgers, rolled maps, and boxes filled with yellowed letters sat untouched. At the center of the room was a small desk, its surface holding a sealed envelope marked with a red wax stamp. Janessa ran her fingers lightly over one of the maps. These look old, very old. Liang broke the wax seal and unfolded the letter inside. His brow furrowed as he read aloud in a low voice. This is a statement, a confession. It says the land was taken by deceit. It names names. The weight of the discovery settled over them like a shadow. This was the proof Liang had been searching for, but it was also dangerous. A faint noise came from the hallway. Janessa turned quickly. Through the narrow crack in the door, she caught a glimpse of movement, the shadow of a man standing just beyond the light. Liang quietly closed the envelope and slipped it into his jacket. We should go, he whispered. Janessa nodded, her pulse quickening. They stepped back into the hallway, the hidden door closing silently behind them. Neither spoke as they walked toward the main lobby, but both knew the same truth. They had found something powerful, and someone else already knew they had it. The night after Liang Wu and Janessa Miles discovered the hidden chamber, the Imperial Crest Hotel seemed calm on the surface. The grand chandeliers still glowed, the marble floors still shone, and the guests still sipped fine wine in the lounge. But beneath the glitter, a quiet storm was already building. In his private office, Simon Crake leaned back in his leather chair, his expression unreadable as he listened to the report from a trusted informant. The words were simple but sharp. Liang and the maid had found something in the old wing. Documents, maps, a letter. Simon's jaw tightened. He had spent years guarding certain truths, and now two people had stepped dangerously close to tearing them open. He made a short, precise phone call. Tonight, he said into the receiver, his voice calm but laced with steel. Take everything from his suite. Leave nothing behind. Hours later, while most of the hotel slept, two men in dark clothing moved silently through the hallways. Their footsteps made no sound on the thick carpets as they picked the lock to Liang's room. Within minutes, they had emptied the desk drawers, unzipped suitcases, and removed every scrap of paper. The sealed letter, the land deeds, the old maps, all gone. By the time they left, the room looked untouched, as if nothing had ever been there. The next morning, Liang opened his suitcase and froze. "It's gone," he said, his voice low but heavy. "Everything is gone." Janessa rushed in, her eyes scanning the room. The neat order of the space was more unsettling than chaos would have been. She turned to Liang, her face pale. "This wasn't a mistake. Someone wanted to erase what we found." A knock came at the door. Malik Fern, one of the hotel's younger security guards, stood there, glancing nervously over his shoulder before stepping inside. "I don't have much time," he whispered. "Last night, I saw Mr. Craik meet two men at the service entrance. They handed him a large folder. Then they all went up to this floor. Later, he told us to erase the security footage." Liang's jaw set. Janessa took a step closer to Malik. "Why are you telling us this? You could get in trouble." Malik swallowed hard. "Because it's wrong. ... And because you're the first people I've seen stand up to him. I can try to recover the deleted footage, but it'll take time." "Do it," Liang said. "We need proof." That afternoon, Janessa reached out to Emma Cho, a historian she knew from the local cultural center, and Lucas Reed, an investigative journalist known for uncovering corruption in the city. They met in a small cafe a few blocks from the hotel, away from prying eyes. Emma listened as Janessa and Liang explained everything. The pendant, the secret room, the stolen documents. She tapped her fingers on the table. "If the original records are gone, we'll have to rebuild the case from public archives. There may still be copies of deeds, letters, and ownership maps." Lucas leaned forward. "And we'll need witnesses, people who can speak to the history. This won't be easy, but if we gather enough, it will be impossible to ignore." Over the next 2 days, the group searched through dusty boxes in city archives, scanned old newspapers, and traced property records that reached back decades. Slowly, they began to piece together the same story the stolen letter had told, that Liang's grandmother had been tricked into losing the land, and that the family who owned the imperial crest had profited ever since. But the deeper they dug, the more they felt the pressure closing in. One evening, Janessa's phone rang. The voice on the other end was low and urgent. "You don't know me, but you need to be careful. Simon Craik has hired people who specialize in ruining reputations. They will make you look like criminals if they have to. Stop now or it will get worse." The line went dead before she could respond. Janessa told the others about the call. Lucas's face darkened. "That means we're getting close. We need to prepare for him to come after us directly." Emma suggested they make multiple copies of every document and hide them in different locations. "We can't risk losing everything again," she said. Meanwhile, in his office, Simon poured himself a drink and stared out at the city skyline. He had the stolen documents locked away, but it wasn't enough to ease his mind. He knew Liang and Janessa were still working, and now they had help. The thought made his grip tighten around the glass. He picked up the phone again. "Keep watching them," he ordered. "Report every move, and if they get too close, shut them down." That night, Janessa couldn't sleep. She stood by her small window, looking out at the street below, the city lights flickering against the dark. The danger was real now, but so was her resolve. She knew they were no longer just chasing the truth for Liang's family. They were standing against something larger, a web of deceit that had been protected for generations. And as the shadows around them tightened, she felt more certain than ever that turning back was no longer an option. Morning light spilled across Manhattan as the steps of the Imperial Crest Hotel filled with people. Word of the dispute had spread, and now a protest gathered outside, their signs and voices calling for truth. Inside the towering glass doors, the hotel board had called an emergency meeting. The long walnut table in the conference room was polished to a perfect shine, but the air was thick with tension. Liang Wu and Janessa Miles entered together, their steps steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. Emma Cho and Lucas Reed followed close behind, carrying folders and a laptop. Seated around the table were the board members, each wearing guarded expressions. At the head sat the chairman, Victor Hale, his silver-framed glasses catching the light. Victor's voice was calm but firm. "Mr. Wu, Miss Miles, we have heard you wish to present evidence regarding the property's history. Please proceed." Liang began in clear English, each word deliberate. "I am here for justice, not revenge. My grandmother once owned this land. It was taken from her through deceit. I have come to prove it." Before he could continue, the doors burst open. Simon Craik strode in, his eyes cold and his tone sharp. "These are baseless accusations. Nothing they say can be trusted." Janessa stood and set the laptop on the table. "We have more than words." With a press of a key, images of old deeds, photographs, and letters appeared on the large screen. Lucas explained each document, tracing the ownership from Liang's grandmother to the present. Emma added her research from public archives, showing maps and sale records that matched the claims. Then the room fell silent as Malik Fern stepped forward, holding a small flash drive. "This is the footage Mr. Craik ordered deleted," he said. "It shows him entering Mr. Wu's suite with two men and leaving with the stolen documents." Gasps moved around the table. Simon's face paled, but he shook his head. "Fabrications," he muttered. Lucas leaned in, his voice steady. "And here is an audio recording of you instructing someone to discredit and silence them." He pressed play, and the unmistakable sound of Simon's voice filled the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then an elderly woman stood from the far end of the table. Her name was Grace Lin, a retired teacher and longtime community member. "I knew Liang's grandmother," she said, her voice steady. "She was forced from this land by the very people whose family runs this hotel. I have waited many years to tell the truth." Victor Hale removed his glasses and looked directly at Simon. "Mr. Craik, the evidence is overwhelming. Effective immediately. You are relieved of your position." Simon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He turned and walked out, the heavy door closing behind him. The chairman turned back to Liang. "On behalf of the board, I apologize for the wrong done to your family. We will restore your legal claim to this property. You will have an ownership stake in the Imperial Crest." Liang exhaled slowly, the weight of years lifting from his shoulders. He turned to Janessa. "This victory belongs to us both." Weeks later, under new leadership, the Imperial Crest began to change. Liang used his new influence to create the Crane Room, a space dedicated to cultural heritage and truth. Janessa was appointed Director of Cultural Programs, her knowledge and courage shaping the hotel's new chapter. The Crane Room's opening was a quiet but powerful ceremony. Warm light poured over displays of history, photographs of Liang's grandmother, and the story of the Emerald Crane. Community leaders, former protesters, and guests filled the space. As the speeches ended, a small boy tugged at Janessa's sleeve. "Why is the bird green?" he asked, pointing to the crane in the display. Janessa knelt down and smiled gently. "Because the crane is a symbol of hope and truth. Green means life, and it reminds us that even if the truth is hidden for a long time, It will always find its wings. The boy nodded, his eyes wide, before running back to his family. Janessa stood, looking out across the room at the faces of people who had come to learn and to remember. Near the doorway, Liang watched her with quiet pride. "We've done more than clear my family's name," he said. "We've built something that will outlast us both." Outside, the city moved as it always did. But inside the imperial crest, the air felt lighter. The truth had been brought into the open, and with it came a new beginning. Yet in the crowd, a man lingered longer than the others, his eyes following Liang and Janessa before he slipped quietly out into the street. His expression was unreadable, and his steps vanished into the flow of the city. For now, peace had returned to the imperial crest. But Janessa felt the weight of his gaze even after he was gone. She touched the emerald crane pendant at her neck and whispered to herself, "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The reckoning had been won, but the story was not over. Somewhere beyond the grand doors, the next chapter was already waiting to be written. End.